With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halverson.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. I am Sabrina Halverson. She is Lori Boyer. Lori, we were talking off mic about something going on in Illinois. It's been going on for a couple of months now, but let's fill in.
All right. So this issue, the Illinois Farm Bureau is suing the American Farm Bureau Federation because the American Farm Bureau Federation Board of Directors elected to vote out Illinois Farm Bureau. So I need to give you a little bit of background and context to really understand this. And actually, it took me a couple of interviews to really understand this as well. So Illinois Farm Bureau has their own insurance company. It was founded in 1925, and it's called Country Financial. Country Financial now operates in other states, but it is one of the biggest farm insurers, if not the largest in Illinois. So the American Farm Bureau Federation is blaming the Illinois Farm Bureau for refusing to counter Country Financial's decision in that they are now going to allow non-farm policies to be sold to the general public and not just farmers. So that is at the foundation of this whole thing. Is American Farm Bureau Federation believes that any type of this insurance that is controlled by the state association needs to be maintained within the association. In other words, needs to be maintained and managed by farmers helping farmers. Now, the whole reason why Country Financial has decided to make this move is purely really financial. It's really about surviving and staying relevant and trying to keep going and trying to continue to serve the population, not only of farmers, but also of non-farmers, and keep that agency, that risk management agency going. So that is kind of at the heart of what is going on here. I hope I explained that correctly, Sabrina. Did I explain that correctly?
Yeah, you did. And
Okay.
it's an interesting topic because you're right. The reason that they decided to expand out was essentially to keep the business going. They needed to diversify in their customer base, and so they did. But the AFBF had a problem with that and decided, well, since you're not strictly farmer focused now, you no longer qualify to be in our organization. We are kicking you out. And that has a lot of ramifications for not just the Illinois Farm Bureau, but for other farm bureaus around, around the nation as well. And it could have, it could bring forth situations that we haven't even thought about yet. But what happens when you take a farm bureau, a state farm bureau, out of the national organization? Do they no longer have the protections from the AFBF, or, how does this affect those farmers in Illinois is my question to start, one of my questions to start off with. And it's an interesting one to think about. I mean, you have to really take a look at what is AFBF actually doing for the farmers. They do a lot of advocacy and policy work. Well, I don't know. Is that a state specific thing, or will farmers in Illinois still be benefiting from that on a national level, which I happen to think they will be? I don't know. How do you think that the farmers in Illinois will actually be affected by this?
Well, first off, we have Illinois Farm Bureau is one of the biggest affiliate organizations in the country, 400,000 members. And that is a lot of members that will be affected. As far as I know, in interviewing the Illinois vice president, and his name is Evan Holteen, they're going to keep on keeping on. They're going to keep on being affiliated. They're going to keep on moving forward. I will answer your question, I promise. They are going to continue with what they're doing to advocate and work for their farmers and ranchers in the state. They have filed a lawsuit against AFBF, claiming that this is unfair, unjust, whatever all the words are that they use in that, and saying that it is not right to be doing that, to just kick out an organization because an organization is making a financial move and trying to stay afloat. I'm not exactly sure how Farm Bureau members will benefit or not benefit by not being affiliated with the National American Farm Bureau Federation, because to your point, AFBF, they're also going to keep on keeping on. I'm not sure exactly what all those are. Next time I do an interview with them, I will have to ask about some of those particulars.
Right. And I'm also really curious. So, does the Illinois Farm Bureau still get to keep the title of Farm Bureau? Is it still a Farm Bureau, or do they have to relinquish that at some point? I haven't seen anything that said that they would have to rename themselves. So, do they get to just still be the Illinois Farm Bureau?
That's a good question. I would assume so,
Hmm.
because even though the Farm Bureau is the same as AFBF, I don't know, that could come up at some point. But as of right now, I assume so. I've not heard otherwise. And I don't know, how that works for trademarking purposes, but I would assume that they can continue to use that name. But, we'll
Yeah.
have to see as things come out. I did not read that anywhere or in the interview, did that come up at all with regard to the litigation that's at stake here?
And you mentioned how big the Illinois Farm Bureau is. I think you said 400,000 members. Can you imagine Illinois not being represented anymore in AFBF? I mean,
Yeah.
with those numbers, all of a sudden just not I don't just not being represented at like the national meeting they hold every year in January, or you know, I don't know. It's an interesting topic. And I do have more questions for you, but we do need to take a quick break. So we'll continue talking about this when we come back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. She's Lori Boyer, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halverson.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We are talking about the Illinois Farm Bureau that may be being expelled from the American Farm Bureau Federation and what that could mean. And that could also have some effects on, well, maybe not effects, that might not be the right word, but, with this lawsuit that's going to happen now, Illinois is suing AFBF. And that means basically member fees from all over the nation are going to have to go to help pay for that lawsuit, right?
Yeah,
You would
that is
think.
true. Yep, that is correct. And as you were talking about, what might happen by not being an affiliate member, Illinois would lose their voice in national policy setting. Now, I have interviewed several Illinois farmers, ranchers, Farm Bureau members over the years
Hmm.
that I've been doing this, and they usually follow along for the most part with what's going on nationally. There's not
Yeah.
usually a whole lot of state specific things, but there is, because they have a lot of sustainable aviation fuel and a lot of ethanol in that, a lot of stake in the game on that. So I'm wondering, like you, what that might mean for national policy setting. And the other fear that they have, again, in interviewing their vice president, as I mentioned before the break, Evan Holteen, is will Illinois lose members themselves as a result
Right.
of this?
Right. But I think that if a state farm bureau is going to be removed from the National Farm Bureau, I feel like, and this is my opinion, so send the hate mail to me, Sabrina. Okay, so but I think if you're going to be kicked out of Farm Bureau, Illinois is one of the states that it's not going to matter as much because it's so similar with the rest of the Midwest. Everything that the farmers need in Illinois is the same thing that the farmers need in their neighboring states. Now, if a state like California were to be removed. Well, California farmers, their needs are unique. I mean, what we need in our state as far as policy and regulations or protections from regulations, things like that, because we're so specially crop focused, and that is different from most of the other states. And also, even when it comes to other specially cropped states, we're the biggest and we have the most needs. And that's just the way that's just the way it is. So, I would think that, and of course, I'm always biased toward California, and I acknowledge that. But, for a state like Illinois, I feel like they need less of that national protection because they're still going to get it because they're exactly the same as the rest of the Midwestern states. And Illinois is going to hate me for saying that, but you know, let's take it for what it is. The Midwest is the Midwest, and this Midwest, even though one state is out of the AFBF, it is still widely covered.
Yeah. And here's another point to that is that several of Illinois' farmers and ranchers make up a lot of national leadership and organizations.
Yeah.
So you can't help but wonder some of the politics and how, just kind of the whole feel and culture of how that will look as well. To me, those are things I think about because I think about the behind the scenes type things.
Right.
But you're probably right on the issues, but I'm wondering if you're a farmer, will you be like, well, so should I keep paying my dues? Should I keep paying for this? Yes, it's still going to be important for state legislative issues. But Illinois works a lot on national issues. So then you think, "Hmm, is it really, as a farmer, I mean, you think, is it really worth my dues?" And that is a big fear. So
Mhm.
that'll be really interesting to see, and something I'll be following is, will they lose members, or will they lose a significant amount of members? I'm sure they will.
Right.
And as we started here talking about the fact that they're selling policies, Country Financial selling policies to non-Farm Bureau members, non-Farm Bureau members already don't see why should we buy a membership just to buy insurance? So I'm just curious
Right.
to see how far that will go.
Right. And that's, and that's an interesting question also. Also because when I think of Farm Bureau in California, insurance isn't necessarily the first thing I think of at all, actually. It's all of the other things that they do for our farmers. And so, and that's great to point out too, that in the Midwest, again, insurance is one of the key things, one of the key reasons for Farm Bureau. Well, they're still providing that insurance. They're just not, reserving it to only farmers. They're providing it to other people as well. So, I mean, it's an interesting thought. I don't personally, I don't see the problem with having other customers who are not farmers as well. I think that that makes a stronger business. And business, the entire goal of business is to succeed, right?
Well, and don't we always talk about diversification in
Yes.
farming?
Yes.
It's the same thing, and that's part of their point. It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. I mean, and it seems like, I don't know, it's such a dramatic move for AFBF to just say, okay, we're going to not let you be part of. But I can also see, trying to see both sides here, in my very limited viewpoint. But AFBF does need to stay to its mission, especially with being an organization like that. It needs to stay to its mission. And so, if this subset of it did not stick to the mission of the AFBF, then yes, I can see why you would then need to make the vote to remove them from the organization. I can
Yes.
see that.
Yes, but those farmer customers are still going to get the same benefits. When you deal with when you're a Farm Bureau member and you deal with the affiliated insurance agency, which all farm bureaus have in each state, you get discounts, you get, package deals, you get all kind of stuff like that. They're still going to get all that. So they won't lose that. It's just opening up to other customers.
Right.
But as you said, that is the foundation of the whole decision. And I believe I read it was 30 board of directors on AFBF representing all areas of the country. And their point was that we need to maintain farmers working for farmers. Farmers need to have
Yeah.
control of organizational decisions. And this opens it up where farmers may not always be in control of the organizational decisions.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you and I have both served on the board of directors for a big national organization, and in fact served together and had to make some extremely difficult decisions that you wish that you never had to make, but it's in your hands and you have to follow, the bylaws and everything that's written before you, and you have to follow it and to make your vote. And it can be really difficult, and it's a convoluted situation, but that's what you take on when you become a board of director. So, well, it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out. We have run out of time once again. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. She's Lori Boyer, and we'll be back in a moment. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. How does the use of humates contribute to water conservation and improved nutrient efficiency in farming systems?
It's a simple thing. Humates are I joke it's the caramel in the nut roll, but what it does, it helps these soil aggregates form colloids. And those colloids are little clusters of soil that have macropores and micropores. Those micropores are what's really doing the work for storing nutrients and water. Through capillary action, those micropores can hold more water. And so by increasing those soil aggregates and increasing your organic matter, you actually increase that soil's ability to hold water and hold nutrients, and therefore make a more efficient use of the nutrients and water applied.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the company, if that's okay.
Sure.
And Live Earth, from what I understand, is celebrating 35 years in the industry. Tell us a little bit about how the company has evolved over those years.
Yeah, so it's interesting. 35 years ago, when we were promoting humates to do some of these things, such as nutrient use efficiency, at the time, fertilizers were very inexpensive. And so these regenerative agriculture and soil building ideas were fairly nascent. They weren't embraced by mainstream agriculture and mostly encouraged by hippies and some of these environmentalists. So it's really changed in the last 35 years where nutrient use efficiency has become a big deal. And all of a sudden, these ideas that we were talking about the 80s that weren't very mainstream are quite in the main now. And I joke that we were cool long before we were cool. We just didn't know it. But the truth is, to be a leader and a visionary in this industry, it took 35 years for us to really realize that these products are needed and necessary for modern agriculture.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Lori Boyer.
My guest here today is J.R. Smith. He is a vice president and co-founder of a nonprofit called the Veterans Ranch. Before we start talking about this organization, J.R., let's find out more about you and your background.
Sure. So been married for going on 24 years. My wife, my dad, and I were the ones that founded Veterans Ranch. My dad's a U.S. Navy veteran, 69 to 73. Been in and around horses off and on, I guess, my whole life. I was the country kid that grew up in the county. I'm born and raised in St. Louis, actually. Was always more comfortable out in the woods than I was. I mean, I love where I grew up in my childhood, don't get me wrong. But, when you got to get out to central Missouri and go deer hunting or go out to extended families' farms and get to ride horses or go out on Boy Scout trips and all those kind of things. So that was always, me. But this look in St. Louis County in the 80s, wasn't the thing, right? So moved to Florida in 1999, met my wife, got married in 2000. When I find something I like, I go after it, jumped at the opportunity. She actually reminded me how much I forgot how much I loved horses, because she's a horsewoman herself. And so we'd go out on trail rides and everything else, just did everything we could to get back around horses a bunch again. But it was fast forward up to 2017. Had an empty legal pad by the bed and woke up in the middle of the night and chicken scratched the word ranch and went back to sleep. I had no idea what that meant. And we did a lot of what I call paper to ceiling praying, kind of like, hey, you going to explain what this means? And about 2 weeks later, we were at a Chili's for lunch on our way to Bass Pro Shops, and the ideas just started hitting. I asked my wife for a pen, which she made a joke because I've been in sales since I was 18. I never left the house without a pen. But that day I did. And about 20 little Chili's napkins later, the ideas for the Veterans Ranch were born. And going on 7 years, here we are today.
JR, can you give us more details on what that vision looked like to you?
Oh, I remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, the funny thing was I had to ask the waitress for more napkins, and she's like, I'll give you the whole case, but what do you need all these for? I mean, the good, the bad, the ugly ideas, it was just get them all down on paper. Right from the jump, we knew it was going to be for veterans. That was a no-brainer because we were trying to figure out something better to do for veterans than just deny till you die. Here's another pill at the VA. And we knew what the veteran daily suicide rate was at the time. It's 1,000,000% worse now, but that's a different topic. We started writing down, immediate household family, Gold Star families, because we have to explain daily what Gold Star families even are. The families get so left behind. Everybody remembers the veteran. Well, the whole family serves. And so we were writing that down. Then we were writing down cabins. And we didn't know what cabins meant, but we were writing down cabins. Well, cabins turned out to be short and long-term cabins on the facility for veterans to come stay at. Let's say they're, going to have a reunion and they just want to stay there. And the other part of the cabins are going to be for more long-term to help veterans and their family get back on their feet. So, I mean, we were just writing all that stuff down and, and we're like, well, do we charge? Do we not charge? No, it's always free for the, the veteran and their household family. So we're a very donation-based, grant-based, type organization. And it was just cool. It was like, because Chili's napkins aren't that big, so it was like 20 of them. And boy, you just talk about chicken scratch, because I was just writing them down and passing them off to her across the table. And I had no idea how to set up a nonprofit. I knew you just didn't go online and do it. So I called my family attorney. He didn't do it, but he referred me to a lady that did. And you just know it's right when you're not pushing the rope uphill. She's going over the, fee structure of what's going to cost to set it up. And she was telling me that, about her husband's 76 Corvette and how he just was always complaining about how it wasn't running right. Well, I'm from St. Louis, where it was muscle car heaven. And so grew up around blue collar muscle car guys, and I know how to turn a wrench. So I said, I'll fix your husband's car. You set up our nonprofit. She did. We traded out the work. She goes, if you keep my husband from complaining about that god awful car, I'll gladly set it up.
That's a pretty neat story there, JR. But I have to ask you for reference, what is a Gold Star family?
So Blue Star family, you have active duty service members. Gold Star is when someone gave their last full measure of devotion for their country. That's when 2 uniforms show up on your door saying, we regret to inform you.
Well, thank you for that information, JR. Now, are you a veteran yourself?
I'm not. I'm a patriot. My wife's a patriot. Like I said, my dad's a veteran, his brother, their late father. I have 4 friends go to the sandbox in 1991. We graduated high school. My wife's dad was Army 55 to 57. I'm that Gen Xer that just had military, deep in their family and friends. It wasn't hard to toss a rock and find a veteran, in our day and age.
When did you officially become a nonprofit then?
December 17th, 2017.
And it actually started in Florida then, right?
Yep, started in Florida. We expanded into Texas in 2020. That was always on the list to make Texas the second, location. And then, of course, COVID came and shut the country down for a couple of years and just slowed down everybody's momentum. But over the last year and a half or so, we've been building that back up. And we're actually in the process of relocating the headquarters to North Texas. We'll backfill Florida, keep doing what we're doing. It's just the headquarters is going to go to North Texas.
JR, where at in Texas?
We're looking at an area called Whitesboro, which is about an hour north of Dallas and Fort Worth.
The conversation continues here today with JR Smith, Vice President and co-founder of the Veterans Ranch, right after this. Back we come here on AgNet West. I'm Lori Boyer. JR Smith is my guest here today, Vice President and co-founder of a nonprofit organization called the Veterans Ranch. JR, you mentioned earlier that you work with not only veterans, but their families as well. So with a new location, the Veterans Ranch in Texas, will you also be serving the veterans' family members?
So it's veterans, their immediate household family, the Gold Star families. When we get the property in Texas, we're looking at 87 acres right now. We will also expand into first responders because now 20 to 40% of first responders are veterans. They took off one uniform and put on another.
And where's the location at in Florida?
So in Florida, we're in Polk County. So we started in Lakeland. It's not a physical location like most nonprofits. You start with a lot of passion, a lot of drive, not a lot of cash, and so we actually developed a network of people we know and people we met throughout the years that allow us to use their horses in their facilities to travel around, put on weekend clinics, trail rides, things like that. We knew it was better to do something than sit around and wait and hopefully get something done one day with a property.
JR, can you talk more about what you have envisioned for the Texas Veterans Ranch location?
Some of the services that are going to be offered, the therapy stuff is always free. Every bit of it, always free. We will be offering Western riding lessons, trail rides. There will be a discounted rate for those because that brings revenue in to the nonprofit. The property we're looking at right now, we'll be able to put 20 cabins on. We have this so cookie cutter that we can do the same thing. And like the goal is 10 ranches in Texas, 10 facilities. So, we can put easy 4 or 5 in Florida. We're looking in the Carolinas, Tennessee, south of the snow belt. So you can, do stuff year round and not have to worry about, a foot of snow at any given time and people just can't get out and do anything. We have looked at Missouri. I know Missouri gets in the snow and ice belt just because it's my hometown, but right now Texas and Florida are the main places. So the first 10, they'll be able to pay to stay. Like I said, that reunion kind of example, they'll be able to just pay a nominal fee and stay there. It's going to include their meals and laundry facilities and the whole 9 yards on the property. And then if they want to, do the therapy stuff, that's free. And then we can put a package together for, I don't want to call it a dude ranch because I just hate that term, but that's kind of the concept. And then the other 10 cabins, they stay free on our nickel for up to a year. They'll work at the property. We get them to build a solid resume because resumes nowadays, you're going to have keywords in them because they hit algorithms before they hit human hands. We need to show them how to do a good LinkedIn page. I've seen very successful people that have the worst LinkedIn pages you've ever seen in your life. Just get them back on their feet, get their benefits in order. You can't get your benefits if you're living in your car and you don't have an address. So, we'll have therapists on site that are veterans as well. That's going to be a requirement because a lot of veterans don't go to therapists for multiple reasons. Big one being that they don't understand. They've never been there. I can have a lot of empathy for a lot of things, but I've always wore cowboy boots. I never wore combat boots. And if you get a therapist that, God bless them, they went to school and, got their degrees and everything, that's not an easy thing to do, but all they've done is wore wingtips and high heels. They're not usually ready for the brutally honest answer a veteran's going to give them when they ask, how does that make you feel? Right. And so, we'll hire ones that have wore combat boots and wingtips and high heels. Right. So that way they can get it from multiple perspectives. They can understand it better. So people will be able to come out daily, weekly. We'll set up appointments for them. If they're local, if they're coming in from out of state, we will have funds set aside for so many. It's an undetermined number right now. It depends on the funds, but have so many folks a year that we pay for them to come in and go through the program.
JR, about how many people does that translate then altogether that you anticipate helping in any given year?
Yeah, it's 20 at a time. Now, if it's their families, with them, there will be a lot more involved in that. So they're going to be 2-bedroom, 2-bath cabins. So if they're coming with their kids, you could realistically do 4 to 6 people, per cabin. On the first 10, let's say you got 4 guys that are staying in one cabin, you could have 40, 50 people real quick. With the property in Texas that we've designed, we'll be able to serve 5,000 to 10,000 people a year.
When do you anticipate having the Texas facility fully operational?
The goal is this year because, we've been, we're a very scripture-led organization, and we believe in the every 7 years, kind of a new season. God brings a new season into your life. Well, we're in year 7. They always say you want to hear God laugh, just tell them your plan. But, our plan is to get this done this year, get it moving, because we've been able to serve on average 500 to 1,000 people a year to this point. So it's not like we haven't been doing anything. But when you can make an impact of 5,000 to 10,000 people a year just out of one location, that's massive. Because right now, I can't use the organization's name yet, but let's just say that there's almost 10,000 people on a waiting list for equine therapy right now. And the VA is starting to cover it more. They're starting to refer people to it more than just putting you on a couch and talk about your bad dreams. It's really growing. And, we're just proud to be a part of helping push that along. And getting the message out there to how it can help veterans and how it has helped veterans. Right now, we run about a 67% success rate of veterans that have admitted some kind of PTS. We drop the D. We don't believe it to be a disorder. If anything, it's an injury. And to come back and say what we're doing is helping.
JR, based on what you just said, I just want to clarify for my own self, the Florida location isn't necessarily a stay location. It's one that has events or activities in various locations in the state, but not necessarily a ranch where people come and stay in a cabin, right?
Yeah, the goal is to bring it all to Texas, but eventually Florida will backfill. Florida needs to see what's possible. Florida will get some locations.
JR, thank you so much for joining me here today. For more information, be sure to log on to theveteransranch.org. Again, JR Smith, Vice President and co-founder of the Veterans Ranch. I'm Lori Boyer, and we will be right back with Sabrina Halverson.
This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. How does the use of humates contribute to water conservation and improved nutrient efficiency in farming systems?
It's a simple thing. Humates are I joke it's the caramel in the nut roll, but what it does, it helps these soil aggregates form colloids. And those colloids are little clusters of soil that have macropores and micropores. Those micropores are what's really doing the work for storing nutrients and water. Through capillary action, those micropores can hold more water. And so by increasing those soil aggregates and increasing your organic matter, you actually increase that soil's ability to hold water and hold nutrients, and therefore make a more efficient use of the nutrients and water applied.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the company, if that's okay.
Sure.
And Live Earth, from what I understand, is celebrating 35 years in the industry. Tell us a little bit about how the company has evolved over those years.
Yeah, so it's interesting. 35 years ago, when we were promoting humates to do some of these things, such as nutrient use efficiency, at the time, fertilizers were very inexpensive, and some of these regenerative agriculture and soil building ideas were fairly nascent. They weren't embraced by mainstream agriculture and mostly encouraged by hippies and some of these environmentalists. So it's really changed in the last 35 years, where nutrient use efficiency has become a big deal. And all of a sudden, these ideas that we were talking about the 80s that weren't very mainstream are quite in the main now. And I joke that we were cool long before we were cool. We just didn't know it. But the truth is, to be a leader and a visionary in this industry, it took 35 years for us to really realize that these products are needed and necessary for modern agriculture.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halverson.
It's time for this week's Almond Update, brought to you by the Almond Board of California. You can find them online at almonds.com. For the Almond Update this week, we have a portion of the Almond Journey podcast. This one features UC Cooperative Extension Tree Crop Farm Advisor Franz Niederholzer, who joined the journey to provide a practical overview of best practices for spray operations in an orchard. Here's Tim Hamrich with the episode.
Starting with the importance of getting the operational side of spraying right. The best equipment and the most expensive products won't be effective if there are errors made in the spraying process. And that is the problem that guides a lot of Franz's work.
The application practices at a local level are really important. There's so many different pieces to the puzzle. There's sales force for materials, what goes in the tank, and then the actual tank itself, who sells that and maintains it. But how a sprayer is used really falls down to the grower and his or her operation, whether they're doing the spraying or whether they have employees doing the spraying. And there's so many parts to the movement. And ultimately, many times the efficacy, the success of a practice comes down to how it was done. University does a lot of great work on scouting for pests and timing of pest application, but the application itself is a critical part of that whole IPM program. So extension advisors having the knowledge of how to calibrate, how to troubleshoot a situation where there's a question about pest control or nutrient application or what have you, having knowledge about that is a really important part of a successful farming. And there's not really a lot of that done in the private sector. It's a tough niche.
Absolutely. And so when you first kind of came, on the scene when it comes to almonds, where did you notice opportunities to begin your work? What did you focus on early on?
Application efficacy, drift management, that's always a concern. There's been surface water quality and drift into surface water quality, things of that nature. When I first got started, there was a lot of concern about dormant spray, environmental impact of dormant spraying, dormant spraying is really not practiced as much as it used to be 20 plus years ago. So that's where I got started, was focus on dormant spraying. And then in almonds, if navel orangeworm control became more and more of an issue in the last few years, and pest pressure has gone up, and there's been some great work done on spray coverage by a number of people over the last 15 plus years. As chemistries have changed a bit, I've been able to step in and help extend that information that they've developed. People like Joel Siegel, Ken Giles, Brad Higby, folks like that have done some great research on, and I've helped extend.
Yeah. And with that, what does that look like to better understand spray coverage for you? What's the process look like to get that done?
A very, very sharp spray engineer years ago said that every spray application is a case study. It's like you're playing a card game, and every time you're doing a spray job, you get dealt a set of cards. They're always different. The equipment might be the same, but the day you're spraying, the wind, the humidity, the direction of the winds, wind speed, not just is it blowing, but which way is it blowing? What's the pest you're trying to control? What's in the tank? What's the particular chemistry? How does that particular chemistry work? All those things need to be considered when trying to make the best application possible. And then, as Ken Giles used to say, the goal is a three-part. It has to work efficiently, and it has to be safe. It has to be safe to the applicator, it has to be safe to the crop, it has to be safe to the surroundings, water, people, things off farm. So those are the things I think about when you're making that decision. If someone says, hey, I didn't control mites, I sprayed for mites and they're back. What went wrong? Part of it could be application, the practice.
And what about the spray technology itself over the years? How has that improved?
That's a good question. There's been a lot of research done into new equipment, sensors, ultrasonic sensors, LiDAR techniques, all sorts of different things. But I think the basic message of how to deliver with a traditional equipment, how to do a good spray job has always stayed the same. But there are things available out there. The job's so critical to application that it's a high bar for new equipment to come into the market and be successful. It has to be, because it's new. It requires training to whoever uses and maintains it, and that doesn't always fit together to have the best use of that technology. In order to do what you've always done better, you have to up your game, and with all the things that growers and their employees have to do, that sometimes that's not as easy to do as you would think, as it looks like on paper sometimes.
And when you say up your game, tell me more about what you mean by that.
The maintenance of the equipment, the knowledge that goes into setting up, because the new technology is available, but it's not plug and play. You have to set the sprayer up to fit the orchard, and then the technology, if you will, moderates what you set it up to. But the machines respond to the situation, or they respond to the conditions you've got from the baseline that you set up as an applicator or an operator or manager, owner. And if you don't have the fundamentals of nozzle selection and ground speed and sprayer size, if the sprayer isn't sized to fit the orchard or the setting, then it's not successful. So the new technology really has to operate off a really strong foundation of understanding of the basics of the traditional practices to spray application. Otherwise, it won't be successful.
And nozzle selection seems like a big one that can get really nuanced. Is there like a nozzle selection guide out there or anything? Where do we start with nozzle selection?
Oh boy. The challenge with nozzle selection is you're spraying into high-speed airflow. It's the fan. The faster the air is moving, the more it impacts the droplets themselves. So you've got, not only are you generating a droplet at the nozzle, but you're impacting that with the airflow. So that can make even smaller droplets. So the bigger the nozzle, the bigger the hole. Say a D8 versus a D4. The D8 is going to make bigger drops than a D4, and selecting those cuts down on drift. Bigger droplets drop. They're heavier. They're less efficient in application, but if you're looking to limit drift along a roadway or the edge of a field, having a different set of nozzles for the edges may be an important part of a drift control program, depending upon the critical nature of that edge. That's more work, but that can be done. If you could spray every time you spray when the wind is away from those sensitive sites, that'd be perfect. But the challenge of IPM is you monitor, you time, you select material, and if the IPM model says it's time to go, how do you make that go as safely as possible? Wind direction, wind speed, nozzle size. It gets back to that case study business. But knowing that the most important thing growers can do is droplet size selection, and then that has to be run through the whole gamut of setting up a sprayer. So it's kind of hard to have a simple answer to that really important question, but being aware of needing to do it and having a plan, talking to your local farm advisor to put something together, or a manufacturer's rep, depending upon who your best connections are.
And what about calibration of these sprayers? Can you talk about kind of some of the best practices and things that growers should be watching out for there?
Sure. The basic calibration is how many gallons per acre are you spraying? It takes a little bit of practice. Once you've done it, it's like riding a bike. You're all set, really. But it does take some practice to get there. Establishing the proper ground speed for the orchard, the nozzle size, placement, and delivery. You have to figure out your ground speed, which is it turns out to be the area you're spraying, because the orchard your swath width is basically trunk to trunk, so that's really established. So your ground speed down the row times the trunk to trunk dimension gives you basically acres per minute, and you know how much your sprayer is applying with all the nozzles open at the certain settings, pressure settings on the sprayer, RPMs on either the sprayer motor or the PTO. That goes into determining gallons per minute. And that's fundamental or key to mixing the chemicals, because your rec says, or the label says, so many ounces or pounds per acre. Well, the amount you deliver is really based on how many gallons you're spraying per acre. So if you don't know your gallons per acre, you don't get your mix right, and then you start off on the wrong foot. And then you have to make sure that once you have the gallons per acre established, you've got to distribute those gallons per acre evenly and efficiently through the canopy, for the best job possible. And that requires nozzle selection and placement on the back of the boom of the sprayer, and then checking with water sensitive paper, which is little yellow cards, 1 inch by 2 inch. You have to get them up in the tree, which that in itself is work. It's not, you'd have a ladder, which is a pain, or you have to have a cherry picker somewhere to get it up there, or poles, and then you got to drive the sprayer through the orchard to check that. It can be done and is done by a lot of growers, but it's time and effort, and it really does require some effort.
That again from the Almond Journey podcast, brought to you by the Almond Board of California. Find them online at almonds.com. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halverson.
We'll wrap up our day today with a little bit of ag news. After advancing above growth neutral in November for the first time since 2023, the overall rural Main Street Index sank below the 50.0 reading in December. That's according to the monthly survey of bank CEOs in rural areas of a 10-state region dependent on agriculture or energy. The December index plummeted to 39.6 from November's 50.2. It was the 11th time in 2024 that the overall reading was below growth neutral. The index range is 0 to 100, with 50 representing growth neutral. Dr. Ernie Goss says, in retrospect, there appears to have been a significant November upturn resulting from the surprising Trump election results. He said the positive bump disappeared in December. Roughly 1 in 4 bankers reported their local economy was either in a recession or would enter a downturn in 2025. The remaining 3 out of the 4 bankers expect slow growth but no recession this year. The Fertilizer Institute is launching the Verified Ammonia Carbon Intensity Program, which is a voluntary certification of the carbon footprint of ammonia production at a specific facility. It's the first program of its kind and is designed to provide ammonia consumers seeking to reduce emissions across their supply chains with an independent and certifiable carbon intensity score. TFI President and CEO Corey Rosenbusch says, as agriculture looks to develop more sustainable and resilient supply chains, the Verified Ammonia Carbon Intensity Program provides ammonia consumers with certifiable transparency that will allow them to quantify the positive impact using low-carbon ammonia has on their greenhouse gas emissions footprint. The program is initiating a 60-day public consultation period for ammonia consumers and stakeholders to provide feedback on the program and its methodology. The intention is to redefine the program based on the comments it receives. Ammonia is one of the world's most widely produced chemicals. That is our show for today. This has been the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. On behalf of Lori Boyer and myself, thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halverson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.